You
like
know what? I'm excited. People, you guys know I'm an extrovert. Okay, Kelsey, I think we need to click in the PowerPoint. Awesome. Okay, so why does an election affect your brand? What is happening where this is something that you even need to like consider this or think about this or talk about this? First of all, in 2018, political spending was more than $2 billion. So in the past, that would have been like on TV spots and radio spots and yard signs and billboards, but we know that digital marketing is a huge component of that now. And so there's a lot of competition, even if you or your organization is not in politics or doesn't really even mess with politics, that amount of spending will affect your brand.
National and statewide elections will absolutely come into your small corner of the market to affect how your posts are being viewed and how many times and all the numbers. So it's absolutely important that even if you feel like, well, you know, the races this year in my area aren't really hotly contested, well, guess what? There's a national level campaign that's going to be spending part of their $2 billion on your area, and they're going to be taking over some of your share.
Right now, they are anticipating that just the digital ad spend in 2020 is going to be almost $3 billion. So like Kenney said, even if the elections in your area aren't considered like hot or big, you know, obviously it's a presidential election year, those ad dollars will be targeted in our community, as well as big statewide races, you know, the governor's race. There's a lot of stuff going on, and all of that money will be put into our market and into our portion of social media. We kind of talked about this. There are local things that are already happening, so it's important to pay attention to that. So right now in August, we have a primary, as well as there's some judge elections, some other local like countywide things, and then obviously in November. So those are the 2 dates that are kind of coming up. We talked about that already.
Well, and it's important to point out that it's not just about dollars, right? I mean, generally speaking, people love to have an opinion and they love to share it. And so that organic post on Facebook is going to be buried under hundreds of thousands of people's opinions and shares about who they're going to vote for or who you should vote for. And so it's not just about the dollars, but it's affecting your campaign at all levels. It's your market share that's absolutely being eroded. So when you do post, you have to be super intentional.
Absolutely. So what are some things that you need to expect going into this? The first thing is peak competition. So with more people paying for ads, your ad cost is going to go up. So if you boost posts or if you run like Facebook ads or Instagram ads, you have to know that you are going to have more competition by things that maybe you wouldn't consider your direct competitors. So for example, if you run a clothing store, normally what you would think of is you're competing with other clothing stores, but now you're also competing with all of these politician ads. The other thing is the heightened ad guidelines. So we all know fake news, that was a big thing in 2016 and 2018. And I mean, it's just always, I feel like that's something that we get thrown around all the time. So knowing that any ads you run, people are going to question it. So it's very important that you, as always, build your brand to be a reliable source, a trusted source of information. But just know that people are going to question things that maybe in a non-election year they wouldn't question. And so thinking about that as you're creating your content, you know, keeping that in mind. And even in this environment, not election related, but like mask related. Like people say that wearing masks isn't political. It's kind of become political just by the way that people interpret things. And so just knowing that if you have a post, whether your business is selling masks or whether you require masks in your business, just know, no matter what your stance is, people are going to come at you either way. And just thinking about that as you are doing posts and as you are creating content around that.
And sometimes it's difficult to really kind of envision what could become political if everybody is judging things on the basis of fake news or real news or what have you. An ad that just recently started being shown from Burger King, I believe it was, is that they're going to start feeding the cows that they make their hamburgers out of lemongrass because it'll make them fart and burp less, which will reduce methane emissions. And it's all political in the comments. I mean, it's, you know, whether or not you feel like that's a threat to climate change, guess what? Burger King is you know, just putting an ad out talking about how it's feeding its cows, or the meat from, you know, which they get the cows, and now it's absolutely political. So, and that's all it's about in the comments.
Which, like Kenney said, you can't always figure out what that's going to be, but being prepared for it and looking at something and thinking, okay, how can this be interpreted? And, you know, as marketers, like, I feel like we always go to both extremes as we're trying to, like, evaluate that. And that helps you come up with responses. And if those nasty comments don't come, or those very passionate comments don't come, then you're fine. But if they do come, you're prepared. Okay, sorry, I'm trying to like read this, and I'm like, oh, I thought this font was too big, and now I'm like, I can't see it. Okay, and then also just that potential distrust of social media in general. And this is why it's super important, as always, and we have preached this for years. It's important to be authentic and engaging and really try to build your audience. However, it's even more important now. You know, we're in July, you have a few months to really create those connections and work on those connections so that things that you post don't come into question later, and that people trust your brand and trust that you're not just trying, even if you're sharing stuff that isn't political.
Yeah, it's important that you either be authentic and be prepared to back up whatever you claim in your posts, especially given the fact that we're going into an election year with a global pandemic and national unrest. So it's really crucial that you either truly believe what you're putting out there, or you just be authentically quiet about it, because otherwise you're going to have to fight a battle that you may not be ready to.
Sure. Okay, so some things as far as what do you need to do to prepare. Obviously, planning now. So using the same strategies as you do as we get ready for the holiday season. Think about if there are any themes in your content that you want to do, if there are any topics that you want to tackle, if there are topics you don't want to tackle. Getting that stuff laid out now when it's not so rushed and you're not like, oh, I have to come up with content today. You can kind of lay things out and lay the groundwork now. Doing that now is super, super important.
Intentionality more than ever is key right now. It's not going to be the time to really be sitting down at home and thinking to yourself, oh, that's a decent idea, I'm going to post it. Now, that's not to say if you have a good idea, you don't post it, but you have to ask yourself, when you have a good idea and you decide to post for the moment, is this in line with my overall strategy? If it isn't, it might be a good idea to put it in your back pocket for a little later, or maybe you need to adjust your strategy.
Absolutely. Okay, so, and this is another one, resisting the urge to join in. And this kind of goes in two different ways. So the first way is, obviously we look at trending topics, trending hashtags. A lot of brands try to jump into that. And you know, there was a funny one, and I feel like we've used this as an example before, where there was like the Netflix and chill, and then all these other brands jumped into that to like Hulu and Wendy's and like all these things on Twitter. It turned into this whole like funny thing. Resisting the urge to jump into trending topics that could be polarizing to your audience. As a business owner or as a company, you have your own opinions and the things that you think as far as politics go, but you have to remember that if you state those out loud in a public fashion, you may be polarizing 50% of your audience and you may lose their business. And so you have to determine, is that the road you want to go down on? And sometimes it is. Sometimes there are things that it's important to take a stand on, or it's important to post about, but sometimes there's not. So as a business owner, you have to decide that. And if you are just the marketer and not the business owner, do not post anything about politics unless your owner, board, whatever have told you, because that is a very easy way for people to devalue the position and to get you in trouble with your employer if you're posting your own political beliefs on a brand's page without like permission.
Yeah, if you are not the sole owner of a business, I would say now is not the time to be brazen with your political postings on Facebook, at least under your brand, or even maybe under your personal brand, because that's important as well as people start to look further than the brand, but not only that, but look into who is behind the brand and what are they saying. You know, there's an entire culture of people out there that are making sure that everybody is in line with everything they need to be in line with, and that's on every side of the political aisle. So it's important that, again, intentionality be the ruler of the day.
And I think that sometimes, I like with CFM, you guys do Share the Harvest, which that I think personally, I think is an awesome program. I think it's really cool. I'm sure that there are probably people who are maybe vegans or vegetarians who don't necessarily think that that's a great thing. But obviously, that's something that your organization would take a stand on and would talk about and would be willing to have that conversation about, because it fits with your organization, it's what you're about. And so being able to really navigate those waters and like determine, okay, is this something that we are going to publicize and take a stand on or not, and kind of figuring that out. Can everyone see us okay? We just got a notification that our internet connection was unstable. Good, okay, perfect.
Thank you.
And then thinking ahead. So strategizing ways to be active on social media without competing against your political adversaries, or advertisers. Yep, advertisers. Can't read, guys. Sorry.
If you're a politician,
right.
sometimes you need to not compete against your political adversary.
So thinking of that now, so for example, with the library, you know, we're thinking of how are we going to compete in this space when the space has gotten much smaller. And we'll kind of talk about some engagement techniques or some different things that you can do here in a little bit. But, you know, one of the things we do is we employ a lot of humor because that gets people sharing and commenting, and we ask a lot of questions. And an example that has come up recently of I've asked the same question 2 different times at different times or different days or different whatever. One time nobody answered, and the next time it blew up. So like we would say, like, when did you get your first library card? And because people want to tell you that, they want to give your opinion, especially the older population, they get really excited talking about how they got it in the Carnegie building versus the current building, or they got it when it was under a different name. So if you have a good question like that and it doesn't work the first time, wait a little bit and maybe post it with a different image or at a different time or on a different day of the week, because there are so many great questions like that where people want to give their opinion. The Chamber's doing a great job with that right now, where they're just asking random questions that people want to give their opinion on. And sometimes it has to do with like the Chamber and like business related, and sometimes it's like, what's your favorite barbecue food? Like, where do you like to vacation? But people want to answer those questions. It's building their algorithm, and so now people are seeing their posts more often. Good?
Absolutely. Sorry, I started thinking about my favorite barbecue and didn't listen to the rest.
Okay, so focusing on engagement. So this is something that's super important as we get started. Like we said, continue or start being intentional on social media. So really thinking about it now. What are you posting that is getting people to engage with you and work with you? Asking questions. So that's a really easy one. And then one that even I don't do an amazing job with this, but it's so important and everyone should be spending more time with this, is spending time on the comments. So even if you're just saying thank you or posting a funny GIF or just interacting with people, that helps boost where more people are seeing you in the feed. And so it's something that it's hard to do on mobile because you have to make sure you're in the Pages app, not the regular Facebook app, or else it's coming from you, like Natalie Newville is commenting instead of Missouri Regional Library. But it's a great way to really boost that and get more conversation going.
It's also important that if you have multiple people managing the page, that you set guidelines for who is to respond, and then maybe like, if there's no response within an hour and no communication between the two people that are managing the page, that's when the secondary person can step in and manage the comments. But it's also important right now, when we talk about engagement, remember that people love to share their opinions normally, but there's a heightened sense of importance with sharing opinions during political climates. So it's important that you make sure that you use that to your advantage. And I would recommend focusing on positivity. I mean, even if you have a political candidate that you're managing a campaign for, it's more important that you boost that candidate's presence than it is to tear down his competitor's presence. Same thing in business, especially in a day and age right now where there is so much negativity out there, whether it's, again, any of the three things that have been mentioned or anything else that's going on. Positivity and asking questions of people will take you a long way.
One other thing that's funny when you talk about setting up stuff. On your Facebook page, in the messenger, you can set up auto responses. So we had set up a common question we get is, how much does your program cost? And so I had set up an auto response that's like, all of our programs are at no charge. We hope you'll join us, blah, 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 blah. So yesterday we got that question, and I set this up months ago, pre-pandemic.
And did you forget about it?
Totally. So it auto messaged, and I text our director, and I was like, "Are you answering these questions?" She was like, "What are you talking about?" And I was like, "Somebody's answering questions on Facebook." And all of a sudden I was like, "Oh, I set that thing up to be super efficient," and forgot about it. But it's a great tool to use with the messages. If there are questions that you get all the time, what are your hours? How much does blah, blah, blah cost? If you're a photographer and it's like, how much do your sessions cost? And you can set up something that's like, call me at blah, 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 so we can discuss packages or whatever. But don't forget you did it.
I feel like this is a perfect time to insert something I've inserted into every one of these we've done for the past 5 years, and that is, if there's anybody who comes up to you and says they know everything about social media, tell them that they need to just go away, because nobody knows everything and everybody makes mistakes. But one thing you might also consider with the automatic responses, especially if you only manage a page during 8 to 5. If you're only managing the page during a certain hour of the day and you're not managing it at all hours, and you feel like you get a lot of messages after those hours, it might be a good idea to have an automatic message that tells people, this is when you can expect me to respond to you. That way people know. There's nothing worse, right, than texting a friend or texting a relative or texting or messaging a business and just waiting and refreshing and waiting. And you're like, come on, where are you? It's a text. Even if you're in a meeting, you can answer, especially now since we're all on Zoom. And so that message feature might be beneficial to you. At the same time, don't yell at your executive director if you think they're answering.
I didn't yell at her. I just asked a question. Okay, so another thing, and this is kind of election, but also kind of pandemic-y, because it's all kind of together right now. So using social media in unique ways that maybe you hadn't thought of before. So one of the ways is customer service, but the most important thing with that is empowering your people to take care of issues via social media. So if you, especially in a retail establishment or a restaurant, and somebody messages you to complain about something, making sure the person that's managing those messages has the authority to offer gift cards or, offer returns or whatever it is that you need to offer, that person has that authority and doesn't just say, oh, I don't know, hang on, let me ask, blah, blah, blah. And we've had that where we had less than stellar service at a restaurant, and I messaged them via social media afterwards, and I was not after anything. I just wanted them to know, this happened, and I couldn't find a manager at the time, and I just want you to know that this is the situation. And they were able to offer us a gift card, and I was like, okay, you don't have to do that, I'm just letting you know, but thanks. So that's a great way to use social media that I think is becoming more prevalent. I know. As we go on. And then the other way is personal shoppers. And I don't know if you can see this message very well on Zoom, but basically during the pandemic, I was looking for some toys for Catherine because I needed her to leave me alone for 5 seconds. Pandemic. And so, but we didn't want to go into stores. And so I just I messaged them and said, hey, do you have Magnetiles? And they were like, yep, it's this much. And I said, okay, can I pay over the phone? And they were like, yep. And we just pulled up and they brought it out to me. And I know that that's a service that Carrie's is still continuing on right now. And there are other ones too, and with Carrie's, I think that they even do FaceTime shopping. So they'll call you via FaceTime and walk you through the store and show you things. And I think that's a great way to take advantage of this and use social media in a new and unique way.
Yeah, I mean, I know we've kind of shifted from politics to COVID, but it's super important right now that we not forget the lessons we learned 3 months ago as business owners, as organizations, that there are different ways of doing things than just the way we've done them forever. Case in point, I'm staring at a little camera and acting like it's a human being. And so these businesses that are offering curbside pickup or again, FaceTime shopping, that's genius. It's genius. And so if you know that there's a demographic that you're missing because they're not interested in going into an enclosed space with a bunch of people who probably won't be wearing masks. Side note, I do have mine, but I'm standing only close to the person who I live with. So anyways, that's a perfect opportunity for you to then get out on social media and tell people about it. Don't say, well, it's not working, people aren't doing it, and they're not calling and asking. Well, make sure that you're telling people about it. And social media is a fantastic way to do that.
Absolutely. And then here are just some easy engagement ideas. Doing fill in the blank type thing. So this is one we've done that has gone over really well. So the best place to read is fill in the blank. You could say my favorite place to shop is, or, the best gift I've ever gotten at Carrie's Hallmark is, or, there's all kinds of things that you could put in there to where people could just fill in the blank. Again, that's an easy way. It's a one-word answer, and so people are more likely to engage with that.
But also think about, before you place this type of question, this one seems pretty innocuous, and many of them do. But before you ask a fill-in-the-blank question, always try to fill in the blank a few times yourself, because you may walk into a trap that you weren't considering when you initially posted. Just throwing that out there. People tend to be devious.
Oh, fair enough. That's when you use the hide comment feature. Just make sure you're moderating.
Actually, during a political year, that's actually a fantastic thing to point out. The hide feature, don't remove comments unless, of course, they violate your terms. And, obviously, you need to think about what those violations entail. But the hide feature in the comment section will allow that person and any of their friends to see the post, but none of the general public that comes to your page will see the post. So if you've got a particularly obnoxious person who just loves to go in and tell you that your business should be closed because you're not enforcing mask rules that we don't have in this county, you might hide that person. Now, if somebody's making a good point, that's one thing. That's up to you. But the point is, use the hide. Don't always go in and delete. And there's a whole social media forum about that somewhere out there.
Another one like this, what's your favorite Thanksgiving food? I like to do this one, obviously around Thanksgiving. But I think that you could twist it, what's your favorite 4th of July barbecue meal? What's your favorite back to school lunch idea? So, there's all kinds of questions around food that you can put out.
See, and that's a perfect example of how my brain immediately goes to people shouldn't be going back to school. We have a global pandemic.
Well, just be prepared.
Do you hate students? Anyways, point being, you have to think about what people will respond to. And I know I did that in jest, and I'm just saying, it's just right now, especially when everyone's combative senses are heightened, it's important that you think about the things that you're posting.
For sure.
Because things that once weren't a problem can become a problem very quickly.
And then using current events or things that are happening in a fun and humorous way. So we posted this in the middle of when you couldn't find toilet paper anywhere. And it was funny, it had a lot of engagement. And so that's a way to kind of tap into things that are happening in the world, but in a funny way that will more than likely not be angry, although people can get angry about everything. And so you just kind of got to go with it and figure out how you're going to respond or not respond before you do all of it.
Sorry, but anybody who lived through March and April should never not appreciate toilet paper. I was serious. Got scary.
Okay, some important reminders, and we kind of touched on this a little bit. So this is your brand's page, not your personal page. So thinking about that whenever you're posting things is super important, but also knowing that people will associate you with your brand, whether you're posting on your personal page or not. And so when I post things on my personal page, a lot of people associate that with the library, even though I'm not working, and that's my personal page, and that's what's happening right now. Same with, like, you think about like the mayor. Like when the mayor posts on her personal page, people associate it with Carrie's Hallmark because that is her business. And so thinking of that when you're posting as things heat up and as you get upset about things or you're passionate about things, just know that there is some association with that, and just keep that in mind. It doesn't mean you don't have to post on your personal page if it's something you're very passionate about, but just keeping that in mind that there is an association with that.
Yeah, I think one of the things that we've all learned in 2020 and a few years prior to that is, your First Amendment right absolutely gives you the right to say most anything. However, it does not free you from your social obligation to live with that. So you need to obviously remember that you're in a community of individuals and make sure that you're not alienating people if you're interested in eventually building profit off of the global population.
Having a strong social media strategy rooted in best practices will be more important than ever. And this is something, again, we have preached, we have talked about. I think it's actually closer to 6 years that we've been doing this now, which is kind of crazy to me. We've done social media for longer than I've worked at a job ever. Like, I usually don't work at a job that long.
So we'll be discussing increasing compensation here momentarily. We're going to need 2 donuts today.
2 donuts. So we've been preaching this for so long about good social media strategy and how to be engaging and how to use brand ambassadors. That is so important now because there are so many other things that we're combating right now with the election and with the pandemic and all of that stuff. So basically keeping on with the things that have worked for you for a long time is so important, and not deviating just because, oh, this is shiny and flashy, I'm going to post about this. So keeping with your strategy, but trying out new things as you go and kind of testing them out.
I think one of the things that I've learned actually in the last couple months, and I think that a lot of people have, especially given the last year of existence on this mortal coil, is get a hobby and talk about that if you can't extricate yourself from discussing COVID and politics and everything at every turn. Find something that you're passionate about that isn't controversial. That way, if you feel the need to post on social media on your personal page very frequently, you're posting about positivity, and you might even be able to tie that into your business. For example, I recently took up cycling, and so not only am I engaging more with local bike shops such as Red Wheel, but I'm also engaging with more local businesses that are friendly to cyclists, places where there's, businesses where there's a place to put my bike while I'm, shopping or I'm grabbing a coffee or what have you. And so those businesses can obviously use that to their advantage. And again, they focus on if they do so, they focus on the positivity as opposed to, everybody has to sit outside because we're in a global pandemic. It's not everybody has to sit outside, it's everybody gets to sit outside because it's a beautiful day. Something like that. Think about the positivity and really find something other than what people are talking about on social media, because it's getting pretty toxic.
Well, and I like that. That's a good idea too, I think. I know there was a push a couple of years ago with our bike-friendly businesses. And I hadn't thought about that, like publicizing that more now, because there's more people in our community riding bikes. Kayaks, you can't find kayaks, you can't find bikes, you can't find pools, you can't find trampolines. Like, the outdoor sports have really taken off. And I know that, like, the CVB has talked about how there's all this research that's showing that people are more comfortable doing activities outside right now. And so finding ways to tie that into your marketing, I think, is a really great idea. And it's a unique opportunity to get more people to your business or with your organization. I mean, you guys at CFN, like, buddy, you guys have all, fishing and all of that stuff. Like, people are flocking to that and learning new skills and taking advantage of that. So you guys have a great opportunity right now to jump into that kind of stuff and market that. And then another thing that I think is super important is not panicking if your insights drop. So if you're looking at your statistics, and I can't see it here, so I'm going to look over here. I'll be out of the camera, but hopefully you can still hear me, because I think this is important. So
Sorry.
if you kind of look at our insights, and I'm going to focus on Facebook more than the other ones right now. But if you kind of look at our insights, so in January, they were okay. January, February, they were pretty similar as far as our daily page engaged users and our daily total reach. And then you see a huge uptick in March. Now that was for two reasons. One, that was when the pandemic started and more people were at home, and so we were sharing a lot of information about when we were closed and what was happening with that, and people were sharing it a lot, like widely sharing it. Additionally, the other reason why they're up more there is I don't do a lot of paid ads for the library, but we did then about our digital resources, because we were trying to reach people in the community who maybe didn't use us that much, but now all of a sudden they are expected to educate their kids at home. So that was kind of our jump in March. April, it dropped pretty significantly, worse than it had been in January or February. But again, if you look at it logically, I don't know about you guys, but April was the time that I was done. I was done being on a screen. We had to do Zoom meetings all the time. We were educating our kids on screens. So there was a lot of times that we were still posting in April at what I would consider our normal time. So I usually post around lunchtime and after the dinner, bedtime, bath time routine for kids. But we found that in that evening time, by 8 o'clock at night, people were playing board games with their families. They were taking walks. They were playing outside. They were not on their phone. They were not on their computer. And so you can see in May, it kind of jumped up again because that's when we kind of realized that. Like we started adjusting our posting strategy to try to fit more what I would consider a traditional 8 to 5, because that seemed to be when people were online and they weren't online as much in the evening. And then if you look at June, it drops again. And again, if I'm looking personally, I'm done. I'm done on screens all day long. And so, people are not in school right now. People are taking vacations. People are gone. And we just talked about this huge uptick in outdoor activities. So they're just not on their computer that much. So I'm not sitting here panicking thinking, oh my gosh, what I'm doing isn't working. I'm also thinking about, okay, what's happening in the outside world that's affecting that. And so I think that that's important, not to look at it. And we did. We looked in April and I was like, wow, that really dropped. And part of it we realized was because we were posting at the wrong time. However, now in June, I don't think we're posting at the wrong time. I think that people just don't want to be inside on their computers.
And I think one of the things that you might want to also consider if your insights are dropping is just being aware of the digital market around you, the digital advertising market around you. I mean, I manage AdWords, Google AdWords for several businesses, and we saw a decline in searches on Google in the month of June. So it was just a down month in general across the board. And like Natalie said, it's just because people are not on their devices as much. I was talking to a couple of friends the other day, and one of them is an Android user, but Apple users, you get a text message or a little alert. It's not text, it's an alert, and it tells you, that your screen time was up or down or whatever. Usually it happens right 15 minutes after we sit down for mass, by the way, at 9:15.
It does.
It's so obnoxious. Yeah, because I'm already anxious anyways. Did I shut my watch off, my phone off? Is my Bluetooth? I don't know, whatever. Anyways, and I noticed that my screen time has been declining as well. And they had noticed the same. So it's not just, don't live in a vacuum. Don't say, well, I haven't been looking at my screen as much, so therefore nobody else has been. But talk with your friends, even if they're not really involved in the same thing you are. You might see just a natural trend in people not being on the internet as much because they're sick of screens. So, don't freak out if your insights drop.
And I think that this is a great opportunity with the Facebook group that we're all in, asking that, hey, is anyone else seeing their analytics drop or their insights drop? What are you guys seeing? We created that group to share resources and kind of be a think tank for these kind of topics. So that's a great opportunity too to jump on there and ask those questions. The other thing that I would have done that I haven't done yet is I should have looked back on June last year and compared. Although really at this point, May and June from last year are great benchmarks because of the tornado. So it might be something more like a longer strategy to kind of check out and see how it goes. So it's kind of a weird time right now as far as looking back at history because of the major events our communities had.
If you are going to do any digging and you do want any advice on how far to dig, usually 3s are good. So if you have a campaign that's running for 3 months, that's when you can really kind of judge it. If you want to judge 1 month to the last year's month, then you really want to go back 1 more year, find an average, and then compare the month that you're wanting to judge to the average rather than, again, because there was, situations the last May, the last 2 Mays now, that could skew things. So May seems to be a month around.
It's good. It's good stuff.
Good, yeah.
Okay, and then obviously you guys know how to get a hold of us. That's our handles on all the different social sites and our email. So I don't know if there's any questions in the comments.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't believe.
It's because we don't do introductions. Like when we don't do all the introductions and the stuff at the beginning, we kind of.
We've got someone here. We can do an icebreaker.
He's like, no, thank you.
Please.